Hi everyone. Emily, have a minute to catch your breath. I know you've just come hot foot from another event. Welcome to this event run jointly by the New Statesman and UK in a Changing Europe. My name is Anand Menon, Director of UK in a Changing Europe. It's a pleasure. I think it's about 10 years now we've done something at Labour Party conference with the New Statesman, so thank you to all of them for being great partners. And Emily needs no introduction. You all know who she is. What we're going to do is have a bit of a conversation now, and I think we have to finish promptly at 10:02, but hopefully have a few minutes at the end for questions from the audience. And I think I'm going to kick off with some touchy-feely stuff.
Can I just start by apologising?
Oh my God, you can't make a speech now.
I just want to apologise for being late. I hate being late, and I'm so sorry. But I was at the Arab ambassadors, and the Palestinian ambassador was doing a victory lap, and I couldn't really leave in the middle of his speech, particularly since he's being very nice about me. So I had to stay. But I am very sorry. I'm sorry to keep you waiting.
Okay, as excuses go, that's quite good. So I just want to start just talking broadly about politics. And
Yes.
I'm quite curious, what attracted you about politics in the first place when you entered politics, and does it still attract you in the same way?
Yeah. I got involved in politics because I was born in the Labour Party, to be honest.
All right.
My mum was a Labour councillor, and the reason that she became a Labour councillor was because my parents split up when I was 7, and my dad walked out on us, and we were completely destitute, and got chucked out of our house. The bailiffs came round, and I mean, it was all kind of fairly dramatic. And a Labour councillor got us a council house. I mean, imagine, you know. And then once we settled down, then my mum was able to work once we were old enough. The Labour councillor came back and said to her, "You ought to pay back, and we need to have somebody on this estate representing the estate." So mum ended up being the councillor for the council estate I was brought up on, and I always believed that Labour was the vehicle for social justice, that there isn't anything else that improves Britain. And I believe in politics, and I believe in the Labour Party. I believe it to my absolute bones, and I will do anything I can to support and strengthen the party, because I think that it's within it is the future of the country.
I mean, you've described yourself before. I've heard you say it actually as Labour through and through.
Yeah.
Has what that meant remained constant to you throughout the years?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's me. I think I come from the heart of the Labour Party, and I am Labour. And as I say, no matter what, I've always wanted the Labour Party to be as strong as possible. I've always wanted the leader to do as well as possible. I've wanted our party to win as many elections as possible. I think that you are better off with a Labour council, a Labour government, a Labour anything than anything else, frankly. I mean, I just believe it. I'm a true believer.
Okay, that's the end of the softball stuff.
Sorry,
but substance a bit now. So I mean, there's basically two clumps of questions. I want to ask you about Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, which you are, and a bit about the party itself. Just on being Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, you know, there's a lot being written about how much more influential select committees have become over the last 15 years or so. But are they really that influential when you're dealing with a government that has a majority of 160 plus?
Yeah.
Go on then.
I think. Well, okay. So we recently published a report on the Middle East, and we called for the recognition of Palestine. We called for the evacuation of Palestinians who needed medical treatment. We have another sort of 7 or 8 different recommendations, which we're expecting the government to tell us why they can't do what we think. I have a committee of really bright, really hardworking, largely new MPs, and we're on it. And we want the Foreign Office to be as good as it possibly can be, and we're there to keep prodding it, to give it ideas, to tell it off if it needs telling off. But that's what we do. And actually, I do think we're influential. I think that the Foreign Office think we're influential too. And know that and other organisations increasingly realise, and other countries realise, that it's worth getting a hearing with us and getting us on side, because we can be influential, and so we should be. I mean, listen, we asked to see Peter Mandelson before he was made ambassador to America, and they didn't give us time to see him. I will expect the next potential American ambassador to be in front of my committee.
In a kind of vetting role, or just
so we can ask them some questions.
Okay. Okay. Just actually, before I move on to the substance, I want to talk about Palestine next. But one of your colleagues, Stella Creasy, has a particular bee in her bonnet at the moment about the fact that we don't have a European Scrutiny Committee. And she argues that actually that is something for which you need a dedicated committee, and that work can't be effectively done by a combination of your committee and the sectoral ones. Would you agree with that?
It is a bit of a mess. So, there's my committee, there's the Business and Trade Committee, who say they don't really want to be doing investigating of trade agreements. There's sort of a whole series of different committees who kind of do a bit, and then probably the most work is done in the House of Lords. And that's fine, but there needs to be elected representatives. So if we were to look in detail and in depth at what was going on with the Trade and Cooperation Agreement and the improvements to it, then it would take up all our time, and we've got the rest of the world to do. So we have to kind of so what we're going to do is we're going to do a hearing every year, but we won't be able to do it in the depth that we would do if we were a dedicated committee. We just do what we can do. So I understand what Stella's saying. I do.
Looked at from the outside, you sometimes get the impression that the government just doesn't want to talk about its policy towards Europe. So there's a lot of provision for regulatory change via statutory instrument. They've removed that committee, and that was a governmental sort of decision. That's problematic, isn't it?
I actually think it's the stories like this that people got really spooked by the general election. Not this one, the last one. The Get Brexit Done election. And I think people just headed for the hills and didn't want to admit that they'd ever been in favour of being in the European Union. Listen, I didn't head for the hills. I've always been in favour of us being in the European Union. I think we should be there. I think it's tragic that we're not. And I'm not going to pretend that I think anything else. But I think that people just didn't want to admit that. And I think there's been a kind of rewriting of history in relation to that. And I think that the narrative is wrong, because I think that we have to remember that it was 48-52, which means that we leave the European Union, but we stay as close as we possibly can. And that, I think, is what we should be doing. And I think that the government were nervous that, and it happened when they started to negotiate with the European Union, when they said what it was that they wanted, which wasn't a great deal. On the one hand, they were told that they were traitors on the right, and on the left, they were told they were traitors because they weren't going far enough. And they just thought, well, we can't win. So it's better just to kind of not talk about it and just talk about it behind our hands and hope nobody notices, but hopefully to get things better. But I think that they began to realize that actually, as far as the public are concerned, they don't want to think about it or talk about it. They just want to have a better relationship with the European Union. And so actually, I think we are given permission by the public to negotiate a better, a more adventurous, a deal that is stronger and more ambitious. And I think that having put their toes in the water and having realised that actually everything's fine, that they will go further, and so they should. And I will certainly be pushing them. When we had the Prime Minister in front of us at the liaison committee, I asked him, well, what's next? Okay, so you've got this list. What's next? What's the next thing you want? And actually he did. He said all the right things. He said pharmaceuticals and chemicals, which are absolutely the next things that we should be doing. And when I see him next, I'll be saying, and now what? And now what's next? We should be pushing it as fast as we can and as far as we can, as profoundly as we can. And I will certainly be one of those pushing it.
But there's a problem with that, isn't there? Which is, if you talk to people on the European side, what they'll say is you can't pick the bits of the single market you like. You're not going to have a bit of chemicals, a bit of that. At a certain point, i.e. now, after we've negotiated the stuff from the reset, you either join the single market or you stay where you are. If that were the choice, if that were the position adopted by the European Union, would you be lobbying the government to just go whole hog and go into the single market as a whole?
I am more of, I have always said that there are two parts. There's the single market, but then there's the kind of less popular, other half, which I've always been more in favour of us being part of. But I think that that the European Union needs to be pragmatic, and we need to be pragmatic. They need to understand the truth, which is at the time when we had a referendum, if any other country, frankly, certainly the major ones in Europe had a referendum, it would have gone the same way. It's just that we had a referendum at that time. And they've all forgotten that now. I say to them, I meet ambassadors and I go, pity us. If you'd had a referendum that time, you would have left. It's just that because we left, everybody else sees how difficult it is and how difficult it's made our country, and how the impact it's had on growth, etc., etc. And now you're rewriting history as well, and you're forgetting that actually your country wanted to, the majority of people in your country wanted to leave at that particular time too. So there we are. So let's work together, and let's actually have a deal that's going to work for you and going to work for us. And you don't need to be quite so uncompromising.
Okay, I think President Macron actually said it at the time. If we'd done this in France, we would have voted to
leave. But if you ask the French ambassador, she's forgotten.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, there's a weird debate now about the European Union, which is done in terms of lifestyles. So Nick Thomas-Simmons said, I don't think we'll rejoin again in my lifetime. Andy Burnham today, I think, said, I think we should join in my lifetime. Do you see us rejoining again anytime? I'm doing this without doing the lifestyle.
Yeah. I mean, I think but the way I put it is it will be up to another political generation. It won't be up to my generation, I'm afraid. We tried to stay in. We really campaigned to stay in. We failed. We tried for a second referendum. We failed. But it's going to be. There will need to be a bit of time, and in the meantime, we need to make the best relationship we can with the European Union in a grown-up way, and they need to be grown-ups too.
Okay, now one of the areas where we've obviously worked most closely with our European allies has been over Ukraine. Are you broadly pretty happy with how the government has conducted our policy on Ukraine? Do you think they could and should be doing more in terms of supplying the Ukrainians, or are you happy with where we are?
I think that we've played a blinder, and I think the Ukrainians know it. And when I've been to Ukraine, the affection with which we are held, couldn't be higher, couldn't be stronger. I've had many meetings with Ukrainian politicians. We've had joint foreign affairs select committee meetings, and they are so grateful for the support that we've given. And it's not just been financial, it has also been political. But we have given a great deal of support, and we must continue to do so. And they recognise, that the British public is behind them, and that we've also given sanctuary to so many of their citizens. And the generosity of spirit, the strength of the British public is something which is recognised. They know they have good friends with us, and we will always be friends.
It's conceivable that support might at some point have to become military as well in the event that we have a ceasefire. Are you confident that the so-called coalition of the willing can live up to its rhetoric? I mean, there's plenty of brave talk out there. I do sometimes wonder whether actually any of it will be possible without a massive input from the United States, which we can't guarantee.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the backstop, which is what's necessary. So we need to be confident that if the worst happens, that the Americans will back us up. Yeah, I think that's right. And that's been the struggle, is trying to get Trump particularly into a position where he understands that it doesn't mean that we're expecting American troops on the ground, but we will expect them to help if necessary. And we want them to be signed up to that so that we know that we have that support. And actually the Russians in a way are showing us the way because of their incursions into NATO space again and again and again. I think we need to have a really strong response to that, and that will actually be a kind of first test for the coalition of the willing. But I think we do need to respond to that strongly, so that if necessary, then there is the team ready to go further if needed into Ukraine too.
Are you confident that President Trump is committed to Europe and to his obligations under Article 5?
I think he's more than he was. I think he's understood it more now. I think there's been, major attempts to ensure that he understands the importance of it. And I think that we have built up political capital with President Trump, and we spend it carefully. And part of it is definitely spent on NATO and the importance of us supporting Ukraine. It's difficult to kind of keep him, we get the kind of right sort of response, and he seems to be in the right place, and then he seems to sway back again, and that's the difficulty. But there is a good relationship between our Prime Minister and President Trump, and I'm pleased that we can be there as a good influence.
Are you at all concerned, I mean, notwithstanding his success to date in sort of balancing these various things, that the Prime Minister is going to be pushed into a situation of making difficult choices between the US and the EU? You can see shades of it perhaps in the debate that's starting about tech regulation. You could imagine it happening on other areas of economic policy where the US want to work with us, but actually that would impede our work with the European Union. Does that concern you? And if that choice presented itself, would you unambiguously say we should work with the Europeans because they're our sort of nearest and closest allies?
So it's always been this way. I mean, we've always been the bridge between the United States and the European Union, and that's always been our strength. And it's kind of one of those things, it's not an easy place to be, but it's quite a creative place to be. And actually, I'm pleased that we're there. I suppose if the chips are down, we'd have to be honest with ourselves. Our biggest trading partners, our nearest relatives, our nearest neighbours are the European Union. But culturally, historically, we have very strong ties with the United States.
Okay. I want to turn now to Gaza briefly. You've been one of the most outspoken critics of the war in Gaza and one of the most fervent people calling for the two-state solution. Were you frustrated by how long it's taken the government to get to where it's got to?
Yeah, I mean, I would much rather we had got there faster than we did. Of course I would, and I was impatient, and I made it clear that I was impatient. But we got there, and I think that people shouldn't underestimate what a major change that is in terms of British foreign policy. I think it's a generational shift. I think there's a new generation of politicians who understand that recognition of Palestine was the only right thing to do, and it was not a gift. It was a recognition of a right. The Palestinian people have a right to their nation, and it was right that we understood that, and that we made clear that we understood that, and that it was not a conditional thing. We couldn't set conditions on the Palestinians. Oh, if you do this, if you're good, we'll recognise your state. No.
And what of its practical consequences? I mean, it's clearly massively important in terms of our foreign policy and in terms of symbolism, but what practically might it change?
So, not a lot on its own, but that's not the reason it was important. It had to be the starting place, the kicking off, the renewed effort in terms of finding a peace. And we should not underestimate our influence, our importance, actually, in relation to this. Historically, of course, we have had such the British and the French carved up the Middle East in Sykes-Picot. We had the original mandate, after the Ottoman Empire. It was us, with Balfour, our fingerprints are all over that region. And people remember that. And possibly our influence is seen by them as perhaps more than objectively it might be, but that doesn't matter. What matters is symbolically, it is really important that we are there and we are working on a peace for the Middle East. But also, there is a huge brains trust in the Foreign Office. We have people, sort of Arabists in the Foreign Office, who have an understanding of that region, and we can be. I think with a lot of situations that happen internationally, before a decision is made, quite often people say, "What do the Brits think?" Because it is important to find out what our views are, because quite often our views are of huge value and are deeply thought through, and we can have real influence and be a force for good in that area. And we need to be engaged, and we need to ensure that we do engage and we do work for. It'll be complicated and it'll be really difficult and it'll take a long time, and it'll certainly be longer than Donald Trump's ability to be able to focus. But we need to be able to say to him, we need to go in this direction, we need your help, we will go off and do the heavy lifting, and we will come back to you.
I don't know what you think about this, but I can't help but find it absolutely staggering how little impact Europe as a whole has on this conflict, which is raging on its doorstep. It's a pretty sad state of affairs, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we have all thought that Israel was an ally, and as with a friend, you'd expect a friend to listen, but this far right Israeli government has been absolutely refusing to listen to any of Israel's long-standing allies across Europe, and it's extremely frustrating and very difficult. So yeah, but if we get there are a number of European countries who I think do want to play a role in this, and working with Arab countries and our friends in the Arab countries, I think that we can put forward together a plan. And as I say, working with the Americans. I mean, when Donald Trump and Keir Starmer met recently, all the journalists went, "Oh, look, Britain's recognizing Palestine, and Donald Trump doesn't like it." And that was the only reporting really of that particular part of foreign policy. And yet, what they missed was Keir Starmer saying, and our British team and the American teams are working together to try to put together a plan for a future in Palestine. And nobody noticed. And that was incredibly important to be bringing the Americans into this. We have a role. We have a convening role in all of this.
And given that, and given the fact we're working with the Americans, do you think it makes sense that even though the UN has now labelled what's going on as genocide, that our government hasn't gone out and done so? Do you think that's just good diplomacy?
I mean, it looks like a genocide to me. But I kind of think, well, what difference does it make? What I think. What matters is what the International Criminal Court's going to think, actually. There has to be a reckoning, and we have to make sure that people are held to account. And there will be a number of war crimes that I'm sure people will be tried for, and they must be tried for, because you cannot have impunity on either side in relation to this. People must be held to account.
Okay, I want to go on now just to talk briefly about the Labour's first year. Actually, do you remember the last time we did this at party conference? I don't know if you do.
No.
Because I remember it vividly, because we did an in-conversation at Labour Party conference in 2019.
Really?
And half an hour into the session, the Supreme Court judgment on prorogation came through.
Yeah, I do remember.
You remember?
Now. Yeah.
And there was absolute pandemonium
in
the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, great days, weren't they?
We all had to pack up and go, didn't we?
Well, we had there were a couple of lawyers in the room with their phone reading out the judgment as it came through.
Yes, exactly. Well, they were reading out and asking me what I thought.
Yeah, it was on the spot commentary. Yeah, breaking news. So, how do you feel about the party's first year in government?
I think it's mixed. This is not news. I think it's mixed. I think we have done some great things. We have done many of the things that we promised we would do, and only a Labour government would do. I think that our policy on being brave and bold and building homes and not letting people hold us back is great. The younger generation needs that. We need more homes being built. On workers' rights, on breakfast clubs, on nursery places. I mean, I could list, but to be a government that actually wants to pull people together as opposed to spending its time trying to divide people, that's kind of an achievement by itself. Being back on the international stage, when I was Shadow Foreign Secretary, people used to openly laugh at Britain because we had foreign secretaries who frankly were jokes, it was appalling. We had a government that openly said that it was going to break international law. Now, we don't have any of that anymore. But the trouble is that we get elected and we have the highest taxation rate that we've ever had. We've had the highest debt rate that we've ever had. We've got public services on their knees, and then we've got a Labour government, and people kind of go after a year, okay, well, why haven't we fixed everything yet? Because they have so much higher expectations of us than they ever do of any other government, which I understand, but people kind of need to give us a break. But I do think that the difficulty has been that we've not, being pragmatic is all very well, and kind of dealing with particular issues, in a pragmatic way is all very well. But we need to be able to be a calling, a movement. We need to have, a reason why we're doing it. Where is it we're going? Why are we doing this? Why are we in power? It isn't just that we're going to be better managers than the other lot, which obviously we are. But why are we in politics? What do we want to achieve? I think we should be about equality, about making us a fairer society. Above all, that's what we should be doing. But we don't seem to talk about that a great deal. And I think sometimes that's very unfortunate. I think it should be a guiding light. What's our guiding? If that isn't our guiding light, fine. What is our guiding light? And I'm not sure that we're very clear about that.
So you think the government lacks a compelling narrative? There's no story.
I think, yeah, and it isn't, having missions and that sort of thing. I mean, I understand all of that, but it isn't. It doesn't grab you by the heart. You need to be able to. The Labour Party is about emotion as much as anything else. That's what keeps us going. That's what gets us up in the morning. That's what makes us knock on doors. That's what makes the argument. That's what wins hearts and minds. You have to be able to tell it from the heart. You have to,
And to be fair, I'm not sure there are missions anymore, but anyway.
I get a bit lost.
I mean, you threw your hat into the ring for deputy leader. Do you think that contest can make a difference? Do you think it matters to the future of the government?
Yeah, I mean, I threw my hat into the ring because I thought that actually it was kind of quite an interesting position to be an elected representative of the party and the membership and the MPs. You couldn't be sacked, and you'd have an opportunity to be able to go in and tell it as it is, and to say, "Look here, I think the boys in the blue suits are leaving out a few things for you. You need to know the full picture, and I think here are some things that you should know." And sort of telling truth to power. I thought it was actually quite a good opportunity to be able. I didn't want to do it for the greater glory of Thornberry or anything. I thought that was a kind of important thing. But the party wanted to have a northern woman, and there's lots of things you can say about me, but I'm not a northern woman, so it wasn't going to happen. So that's fine. I think it is important that we get that whoever it is that becomes the deputy leader appreciates that they do have a platform that has been given to them. It is a gift that's been given to them by the party, and they need to make sure that they use it properly. And that also, obviously, that the leader appreciates that the deputy leader goes into this with good faith and wants the good of the party and wants the good for the country as much as anyone else does.
And talking about that, the government seems to have expended an awful lot of energy in fighting Reform UK. Every poll I've read in recent months indicates that Labour are losing voters from 2024 more to their left than they are to their right. Does this focus make sense to you?
I think the focus ought to be on us being ourselves and being proud of that and being confident in who we are. I don't think that we should try to be something that we're not, because I think that if you try to be something that you're not, people can see through it. And so we've always been a broad church, of course we have, and of course we're the coalition on the left, but we are the coalition on the left. I don't think that there's much to be gained by trying to out-reform reform, because you can just go for straight reform if you want reform. But I do think that you should also make sure that you do listen to the public and learn from them. But in the end, you've got to say what you mean and mean what you say. If you don't, people will see through you.
I mean, let's take a specific example from today. Is it who the Labour Party is to insist that people who are here as immigrants should volunteer in their local communities, where it's not something that's imposed on British citizens anyway? That just seems a little bit sort of imbalanced to me. Is that a Labour thing to be doing?
I don't know. I mean, I think what's important for community relations is that if you come into a community and you're new, that you put down roots, that you get to know your community, that you work with other people, that you make friends, and that we put in as many connections as possible. And maybe learning English is obviously an important part of that. But also volunteering in your community is a very good way of putting down ties within a community, and that community understanding who you are too. So, I mean, I can see the sense in it. I can see the sense in people doing that. I've certainly had people come to my surgeries who have been, refugees and coming into the country, and to do a large amount of voluntary work because they're not allowed to work, and who learn English and who put down ties and have good friends and whose mental health are much better, and and who know they're staying in Britain and they know what their future is and they know their place and they're getting there, rather than being sort of passive.
I've been struck in conference this year, and perhaps even more so conference last year, by the prevalence of flags all over the place. I mean, I have to say, not as much as at Reform Conference, where it was absolutely remarkable. But does Labour have a patriotism problem it needs to address?
I don't think so, no. I don't see, no. I mean, I find it very odd, this idea that, like, some people love their country less than other people. I mean, I don't understand all of that. I really don't. I love my country. I love the people. I love the countryside. I love the culture. Yeah, of course I do, and so do you, and so does so does everybody else here. It's not a competition, personally. I don't think. Really.
Okay, a final question before I open it up to the audience. I mean, the rise of reform, the loss of vote share by Tories and Labour is part of a longer story, which is the sort of gradual seeping away of trust in politics. And you see that, I think Ipsos now put trust in politics as low as it's ever been since they started asking in 1982. I mean, obviously, there's no quick fix to this, and there's no easy solution, and obviously, countries across the world are suffering from this. But what should a government try and do to address this, do you think? I mean, what are the priorities to...
Well, God, I wish I knew. I mean, if I knew. I think that I think there has to be a little bit less of announcing things and then not delivering, which we got so much in spades under the Tories. You know, and that, I think that seeps away at people's trust and confidence. So I think you need to be much more honest. You need to ensure that you're being clear about what you can deliver. I think you need to have a not just analysis of the problem, but also what the solution is going to be and how you're going to get there. And people may not like the path that you have to tread in order to get there, but they like the outcome, and you need to be honest that it is going to be difficult. But we do have a plan, and this is how it can be. I always give the example of this, right? So you know, we talk about public services being a complete mess, and one of the things we don't talk, I don't think, anything like enough is the absolute mess in the criminal courts. So when I was a criminal barrister for 20 years. And during that time, the longest you had to wait for a trial was probably a year, and that was a complicated case. These days, you have to wait 4 years, 5 years. I mean, not just if you're a defendant, but if you're a witness or if you're a victim. Imagine if you've been a victim and you have to wait for 4 or 5 years to give your testimony. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it completely undermines the criminal justice system. And people are not pleading guilty because they know that the chances are the witnesses won't remember, or the victim may have disappeared, or whatever it is. So everyone's pleading not guilty. So the waiting lists are getting longer and longer and longer. Now, the solution that's been put forward is to get rid of jury trials for a large number of different types of cases so that they can be dealt with more efficiently and they can get through the system. I think that if we believe that that will cut back on the backlog, then we should have the confidence to say, we're doing this, but for a limited period of time. We're going to do it for 3 years, and then we're going to bring back juries. I think that would bring the public with us, but it would also show that we have confidence in our own plans. Otherwise, why are we doing it? Yeah, I mean, it's just a simple example. You know, we just need to be able to say, I'm sorry, I know this is unpopular, this is hard, but we have to do this. But don't worry, because once we've done this, then we will get this result, and it will be all right. And trust us.
Okay, I'm going to ask a very quick follow-up. I'm really sorry. We'll come to you in a sec. But why has the government been so tentative? I mean, they came to power on the back of a whopping great, I mean, whatever the vote share, the majority was huge. And everyone knows that if a government's going to be bold, they need to do it earlier rather than later. They've almost seemed scared of their own shadow on occasion rather than actually taking on arguments. Why do you think that is? Is that just being out of power for so long?
I don't know.
Okay, good answer.
We haven't got any money. I mean, that's a big thing. But I don't know otherwise.
Okay.
I don't understand it. I mean, I just think we should be more confident and more comfortable in ourselves and just, go for it.